Hello there, welcome back to T4S. My name is Zola, and we are in the midst of reading a book by Manly P. Hall called Healing the Divine Art, and we are now on page 48 out of 232, so there's still lots to go. Chapter 2, Part 1 is done. Now we're going to do Chapter 2, Part 2. Okay, so we're picking up where we left off. It says, The Indian Hope of the Messiah. Around 1888, a mystical Messiah doctrine based largely upon visions and metaphysical experiences spread rapidly among the Plains Indians from Missouri to the Rocky Mountains. The prophet of this new dispensation was Wovoka, a young Coyote Indian whose seership arose as he was lying dangerously ill with a fever. An eclipse took place, and during the eclipse, Wovoka was in contact with strange power. He believes that he'd been taken into the spirit world, there to be given a direct revelation by the God of the Indian peoples. Songs and dances being an important part of the new faith, sect is often referred to as the cult of the ghost dance. According to Stanley Vestal in Sitting Bull, the ghost dance was entirely Christian except for the difference in the rituals. Background noise. I hope it's not too irritating. Sorry about that. I can't help it. During the Great Ghost Dance given in September 1890 in Arapahoe thaumaturgist named Sitting Bull, not the famous Sioux medicine man, performed hypnotisms with the aid of an eagle feather. The miracle worker waved this feather slowly before the eyes of the assembled subjects, speaking strange words in a slow, measured tone. In a few moments, definite hypnotism resulted. Eyes became set and glassy, bodies grew rigid, and the Indians fell to the ground in complete coma or trance. They remained in this condition for varying lengths of time. Sitting Bull warned against disturbing the entranced persons. They were seeing visions and conversing with the spirits. You know what? I want to interject here really quickly. I really wanted this one particular person to help me. I was at a travel agency and she was going to book a flight for me, and I didn't want anyone else to help me. I wanted her because I really liked her. And she was with a very busy, demanding, one of these high maintenance kind of clients. And she came up to me briefly. The woman was in her office and she came up to me. I was in the waiting room. She said, "Look, I'm really sorry, but she's pretty high maintenance. This could take a while." And I said, "No, it's okay. I'm going to wait for you." And she was like, "It could be like a while." And I said, "That's okay." So she left, and I put myself into a trance, essentially, and I was sitting there meditating, and I was actually talking to a guide. I just started to communicate with him, and when suddenly she was back, it seemed like no time to me, but she was back going, "Okay, I can see you now." And it jolted me out of this vision trance, and it was so jolting and jarring, So, yeah, I think it's like when he said, warning them against disturbing the entranced persons. Oh my goodness. When you get disturbed from a state like that, it's very jarring. From the details of this account, it's evident that this important leader of the ghost cult, and by the way, I ended up waiting an hour and a half for that woman, and like I said, it felt like 5 minutes. From the details of this account, it's evident that this important leader of the ghost cult was using methods for producing trance in no way essentially different from those employed by psychologists 50 years later. Although the purposes of the ghost dance were entirely peaceful and the sect was dedicated to non-resistance and brotherly love, yeah, that sounds pretty Christian. The American government was determined... Sorry, I'm being sarcastic and cynical there. The American government was determined to prevent the spread of the movement. The government attitude climaxed in the massacre of Wounded Knee. Oh my gosh, when 370 Indians who had just surrendered their arms were slaughtered in cold blood by Hotchkiss guns. Bastards. The dead included 250 women and children. Ugh, that's horrible. Thus was ended the Indian hope of the Messiah, who was to right the wrongs of the red man and bring peace to the nations. Okay, so they thought that this was, yeah, well, ugh, horrible. That's horrible. The Sitting Bull and the Miracles. Among the most celebrated of the medicine priests of the American Indians was the other Sitting Bull. He was the medicine chief of the Hunkpapa Sioux. Father Bede, who had spent the greater part of his life among the Sioux, spoke their language and knew most of their leaders, who was finally converted to their religion and initiated into their sacred medicine lodge, is authority for the statement that Sitting Bull was baptized into the Roman Catholic faith. If this is true, he was probably baptized in 1868 by Father Pierre Jean de Smet. Stanley Vestal doubts the baptism, but mentions in Sitting Bull that Father de Smet gave Sitting Bull a crucifix of brass and wood, which remains a treasured possession in the family. It may be seen on his breast in a well-known photograph of the chief by D.F. Barry, the one in which he wears a white buckskin shirt and a single feather in his hair. On this point, Father, later lawyer, Bede adds, I have it on good authority that Sitting Bull not infrequently prayed to Jesus, and that he spoke of St. Mary as a human incarnation of the mystical mother, whom all old-time Dakotas were taught to adore. The Reverend Father Bede's estimation of the metaphysical powers of Sitting Bull is a delightful record of personal struggle with his own mind to reconcile miraculous acts with the fixation he had acquired in years of devotion to the Catholic faith. In Sitting Bull Custer, he remarks, Sitting Bull, I think, did possess unusual powers in the heathen oracular divination. My sense of truth requires this statement. I study, I'm just offended, that they're calling people that are actually really, really spiritually advanced, and they're calling them heathens. It just kind of, okay. I study his well-attested words and acts in the light of which I myself have seen among Indians. At times his soul seemed to leave his body in part, while his body became somewhat rigid, and traveled far away to regions where he beheld the movements of men and heard their thoughts as if they were speaking them in words. Yeah, that's very interesting to hear somebody else's thoughts as if they're speaking them in words, and that's happened with me, and it's kind of an interesting thing. Difference of language seems to have been no impediment. Besides such an experience as this, there are many other things, including the foretelling of future events, which I can account for only on the ground that miracles of power and miracles of glory are allowed to occur among the heathen as well as among Christians. And I am inclined to think that such miracles occur more frequently among the heathen, in their lack of the one ever perpetuated miracle of grace. They have more painful need of other miracles. The power of deity is not restricted. Oh, that's so generous of you to say. Sitting Bull's name is most often associated with the surprise and annihilation of General Custer's troops at the Battle of the Little Bighorn River. According to James McLaughlin in My Friend the Indian, Sitting Bull at the time was in the hills making medicine, and his accurate foretelling of the battle enabled him to come out of the affair with higher honors than he possessed when he went into it. It's said that Sitting Bull never discussed the Custer incident with any white man, but among his own people he spoke more freely, and we have a most impressive account of how this great Indian seer went at night to the battlefield and sought out the body of Custer. He made medicine beside the body, and the spirit of the dead general appeared to him, and they conversed together. It was then that Custer warned Sitting Bull that he would die by the treachery of the whites in 15 years. After the ghost of Custer vanished, Sitting Bull covered the face of the dead officer with a silk handkerchief that Long Hair himself had once presented to the medicine chief. The details of this story are in Sitting Bull Custer by A.M.G. Bede. Sitting Bull remembered this warning. Several times he mentioned it to his fellow tribesmen. The fulfillment was as startling as the circumstances of the prophecy. 14 years and about 7 months later, Sitting Bull was assassinated by agents of the government at Standing Rock. At the time of the murder, Sitting Bull was not on the warpath. He was peacefully sleeping in his cabin. An order was issued for his arrest. Then the affair was so arranged that it was almost certain that the chief could not be taken alive. Those freaking bastards. Indians have claimed the ghost of Sitting Bull has appeared on several occasions. On December 18, 1890, 3 days after his death, the spirit of the great chief appeared to the Two Kettle Sioux in the hills by the Bad River. The story was told by Tom Hetland 2 days later. He said, "Night before last, some Indians were returning from a little social gathering when a sight met their eyes that chilled them to the bone. One of their number directed attention to the top of a bluff, and there stood a figure in white, perfectly motionless. Suddenly one of them cried out in Sioux, 'It's Sitting Bull.' The phantom suddenly commenced waving an arm as if motioning them to follow, and with the speed of a bird, glided from hilltop to hilltop, finally disappearing in the direction of the Badlands. It seems possible that the great ghost dance at Wounded Knee that resulted in the terrible massacre was directly connected with the incident of the appearance of the spirit of Sitting Bull. Among the Sioux, he remains to this day a name to conjure with." No kidding. Holy men of medicine. Since the establishment of the Indian reservations, the medicine men have, for the most part, remained to themselves. They seldom hang around the town as do other Indians, nor do they depend upon their powers for a livelihood, but engage in some occupation common to their tribe, such as farming, cattle raising, or sheep herding. The American Indian priesthoods were not celibate orders, and many of the medicine men married and had families. In some instances, as among other nations, the holy men have chosen to remain single and devote their lives wholly to prayer and meditation. Medicine men seldom interfere openly in the government of their people, but in other ways they exercise a very considerable influence in the composite life of the tribe. The Indians of the Southwest present interesting problems to those interested in metaphysical healing. Many of their pueblos have been inhabited for hundreds of years. Community life for many generations molded the consciousness of the tribe, and it naturally follows that problems of social adjustment, the simple lessons learned by centuries of intimate living, color the religions and philosophies of these old town dwellers. It's been observed that whenever men live together in close and permanent association, they come in the end to fear each other more than they fear gods or demons. And so, as might be expected, witchcraft is regarded by the Pueblo Indians as a principal cause of disease, although demons and evil spirits are recognized as secondary causes of sickness. It's generally accepted that these malignant agencies have been set in motion by witches or by witchcraft. For example, disease may be caused by a wizard shooting some foreign substance into the body of a person who has incurred the animosity of the sorcerer. The stuff shot into the victim may be small pebbles, bits of hair, sticks, or pieces of metal. The shooting is done by magic, and the unfortunate victim does not know that he has been so attacked until pain arises in the part affected. Medicine man's search for the foreign substance is made with the aid of a magic eye, a bit of crystal or glass, through which he looks as he examines the patient. This experiment in pain hunting has been tried upon white men and women, and in several cases these experimental patients have admitted that the medicine man, although told nothing, located the exact place where the pain was the worst. Having discovered the place where the witch shot entered, the next step is removal of the evil thing. The mystic healer places his mouth over the center of pain, sucks out the poisonous object. This he shows to the patient and then causes it to be thrown away or destroyed. The sick man immediately feels the improvement, and the cure follows. This seems to be a very literal application of the Hippocratic theory that disease is due to the presence in the body of some foreign substance. Unbelievers say that by sleight of hand, the medicine man puts the pebbles or other materials in his mouth in advance of the treatment. That's what I was thinking. If I was kind of considering that. If this is so, it's done so cleverly that such fraud is rarely discovered. See, the thing is that, there's the power of suggestion, right? So if you tell somebody, yeah, I just sucked this out of you, and now we're going to destroy it, you're going to feel better. If they totally believe it, they'll manifest it. And that's where the whole placebo thing comes from. You tell people, oh, this pill's going to do this, that, and the other, and it usually does, So there's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say. Accidents in which, now, that doesn't mean to say that that's the only way to do it, right? I mean, you could very well have sucked stuff out. I remember doing energy healing work on somebody, and it was very interesting because and I told them, don't tell me anything, just let me do what I'm going to do. And I was looking for places where there was the most blockage and then pulling stuff out of them. And he commented afterwards saying that, yeah, you found the most stuck places, I didn't tell you, and you were able to sense it. So, yeah, there is something to this, where you can look over somebody and pain hunting like they're talking about here, and then be able to locate the exact place where the pain is the worst. It's amazing what people can do. They just have to believe in themselves. This seems to okay. Accidents in which no magical element is suspected are treated in the same way. A boy studying in a United States Indian school slipped one day on a gravel path and received a most painful injury to his knee. Ordinary methods of treatment did little good, and it was feared that the youth might be permanently crippled. In time, the boy, limping badly and in great pain, returned to his reservation, and his parents called in a medicine man. The healer diagnosed the trouble. A number of pieces of gravel from the path were still in the knee. These he proceeded to suck out to the number of 9 or 10, showing them to the boy and his parents. The knee improved immediately. See, so, it's not always sleight of hand, right? I mean, that's pretty amazing. But it makes me think of these, healers that I think they're down in South America. I just remember reading or hearing about someone who went down there, blah, 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 and they were reaching into the patient's body, into the body. No anesthetic, no whatever, and they just kind of put their hand right into somebody's body and pull stuff out of them. I mean, it's kind of amazing, right? So then the youth was soon back in school and completely healed. In Oklahoma 30 years ago, there was a famous Cherokee healer named Charlie Hughes. 10-year-old boy was suffering from a very unpleasant bladder difficulty, and the white doctors were unable to do anything for him. In desperation, his father finally sent for Hughes. The medicine man told the boy to strip to the waist, and while the lad was doing so, Hughes went to the fireplace and took a shovel full of coals. He warmed his hands over these coals for some time and then placed his warm hands on the boy's back in the region of the kidneys. He rubbed the back softly, chanted some old healing melody, and then whistled a single note, which he repeated at considerable length. After some time, he announced that he had finished and departed. His patient, now grown to healthy maturity, told me the story himself and says that he has had no return of the trouble from that day to this, more than 30 years. Dr. Eugene Poole, already quoted in medicine, each one of our organs, in this case the bladder, but each one of our organs has its own magnetic vibrational field. And I think what he was doing was, and it has its own consciousness, by the way. They actually live within our skin as a kind of community, and they do try to work together, right? And I think that one, he was actually communicating with the bladder. Yeah. So anyway, that's what I think was going on there. Dr. Eugene Poole, already quoted in Medicine and Mankind, has this to say about these unusual Indian healers. The leading doctor within my boyhood memory in the district in which my parents settled was an old Sioux medicine man whose services were considered by the territorial government so valuable that when his tribe was removed to a reservation, he was asked to remain with his white patients, among whom were my own parents. I'm sure that much of the medicine I received as an infant and child was derived directly from the lore of this fine, learned, and much respected old man. The statement from the president of the New York Academy of Medicine should be of significance to those who would dismiss the medicine man as an untutored savage. Healing by sand painting. Among the Navajo and Hopi tribes, an important place in metaphysical healing is given to sand paintings or dry paintings. These are traditional designs related to divine matters or to the mythical history of the tribe and are regarded as bringing special virtues to the sick for whom they're made. These paintings are destroyed as soon as the ceremonies are finished. The designs are perpetuated by memory alone. I'm going to interject at this point and say, that, at a school that I was attending, we had 4 Tibetan monks that showed up, and they did the same kind of thing. They did this massive mandala on the floor in the main hall, and they were able to create that thing in 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, and it was massive. They were so fast, so accurate. It was really quite magical to watch, and it was so beautiful, this mandala, when they were done. And then once they were done, people had a chance to look at it for a few minutes, they destroyed it. And at the time, I'm going, why'd you do that? But yeah, they're destroyed as soon as the ceremonies are finished. Continuing here, it says, some years ago, it was my privilege to have as a guest in Los Angeles the late Hosteen Kla, a distinguished Navajo sand painter and healer. He drew for me with his own hands 26 of the sand painting designs on large sheets of cardboard, and through an interpreter described the symbols and their meanings. He told me that in his healing work, he made the sand paintings large enough for the sick person to sit or be laid upon them as part of the medicine ceremonies. Hosteen Kla, a noble Indian with the face of a sage and the manner of a scholar, said with all simplicity, oh, the face of a sage and the manner of a scholar, and yet they insist on calling them heathen savages, right? Primitives, whatever. Said with all simplicity that when the ceremony was over, the patient got well. Because of the great respect in which he was held by the Navajo, Lorenzo Hubel was permitted to make a complete motion picture record of a Navajo healing ceremony. The film, made about 15 years ago, has never been publicly exhibited, but it was my good fortune to see a special showing at the Laboratory of Anthropology, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Miss Mary C. Wheelwright, an authority on Indian religions, made a few opening remarks and occasional comments. The picture is most revealing and shows the importance of the healing ceremonies in the life of the Navajo people. In the film, the principal medicine man is a cripple who appears to have suffered from infantile paralysis, for he's lost the use of his lower limbs. Known as the crawler, he was brought from a considerable distance to officiate at the rituals. Close views of this holy man's face showed a fine, sensitive expression and a look of deep spiritual understanding. He used very little paraphernalia and depended largely upon the power of his own personality to win the confidence of his patients. Several other famous medicine men assisted the crawler in a depicted healing ceremony which lasted 9 days. Others prepared the great sand painting, which was the central part of the ritual. Miss Wheelwright made the observation that most medicine men are very poor, in answer to the often made accusation that the rituals are intended for profit. No one can see this extraordinary picture without arriving at the firm conviction that everybody involved in the ceremony was utterly sincere and without any ulterior motive. Well, I know I'd be interested to see it, but apparently it's never been made public. In a recent book, Sand Paintings of the Navajo Shooting Chant, the author pays the following tribute to the healing priests of the Navajos. My acquaintance with numerous medicine men, the light in their faces, the conviction in which they speak of their belief, all suffice to convince me that their devotion is genuine. The fact that is incontrovertible is that when discord or disease overtakes one of them, no matter how much power he has in his own right, he submits himself to the ministrations of his fellow chanters with complete faith in their ability to relieve him. If, as so many would have us believe, a medicine priest is one who merely puts on a show for the sake of his own fame, or some reward he might hope to gain, surely he would be loath to trust his life to others of his kind. It's well known that the reputable modern physician, if he becomes ill, is often a bad patient. Is this because he knows his own symptoms too well, or is it because he knows his fellow doctors too well? The medicine man has no such qualms. He takes his own medicine with perfect trust because it's the wisdom of his people, given in ancient times by the gods of the tribe. Intellectual birth by flying seeds. Some of the Dakota tribes have a most curious and interesting belief about the origin of their medicine men. Before birth into the material world, these priests come into intellectual existence in the form of thistle-like flying seeds. These seeds are wafted around in the invisible spirit world by the four sacred winds until they come at last to the abode of one of the orders of gods. Here, the spirit seeds are instructed in magic and medicine, and also in the chants, feasts, dances, and sacrificial rites. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. This is accomplished by the process of the seeds dreaming of the gods. Excuse me. When they've completed their training with one group of deities, the spirit seeds fly on to another, and so continue until they've mastered all heavenly knowledge. At last, perfected in wisdom, these flying seeds make a great journey the length and breadth of the earth, carefully observing the characters and usages of all tribes. In this way, the spirit priest decides where he will be born, and having made this decision, he enters into one about to become a mother and thus incarnates in human form. I had a near-death experience where, a bunch of beings, spirits, whatever, came to see what was going on with me, and then left again. And they came and they looked like flying seeds too. So it's very interesting. When his earthly labors are over, the medicine man returns to the abode of the gods, whom he has selected to serve. Here he receives further inspiration and wisdom, and then is born again as a mortal. 4 is the sacred number of the Indian, and the medicine priest may be born 4 times into the physical life. After that, he returns to space, according to Gideon H. Pond in Schoolcraft's Indian Tribes of the United States. Description of the human spirit as a flying seed reveals an extraordinary grasp of metaphysical doctrine and must have originated in clairvoyant examination of disembodied entities, because that's what they look like. Inclusion of the factor of metempsychosis, it says the passing of the soul at death into another body, also indicates that these Indians were aware of the Oriental belief in a plurality of lives. In a discussion of medicine men, it is to be remembered that women also fulfilled the various duties of the medicine cult. Medicine women were held in equal esteem with the men and became famous as spiritual leaders. the women frequently specialized in problems of childbirth. Like the medicine men, they combined magic and simple herbal remedies. Well, I guess it's kind of natural that the women would frequently specialize in problems of childbirth since, nobody can understand it like a woman. Anyway, conclusions of the misinformed and uninformed. The modern intellectual has considerable difficulty in accustoming his mind to the spiritistic beliefs of older peoples. Dominated by the intensely materialistic viewpoint, which is the present fashion, most writers on Indian religion and healing have assumed that the miracles attributed to the shamans are merely cunning impostures. The objections of the misinformed have been sustained by the uninformed, and oddly, the evidence is regarded as conclusive. In the discrediting of pagan miracles and so-called heathen lore, missionaries have played quite a part. I would say that is a massive understatement. I mean, my goodness, what did the Spanish conquistadors do in South America, right? They get there and then they just dismantled the whole culture, destroyed anything that had to do with their beliefs. They destroyed them. It was just absolutely hideous what they did. So, yeah, the missionaries of the Catholic Church played a massive role in dismantling and removing great cultures, their lore, their history, their medicine, just erasing all that stuff from the collective mass mind of humanity. And that was done for a reason, because like I said, there was an intervention that happened. People were not allowed to develop organically and freely, right? So, yeah, think about that. Let me see. These pious men seldom lost an opportunity to disparage beliefs that differed from their own. In the past, and to a lesser degree in the present, I don't know about a lesser degree, but okay, I'm cynical. The churches have been molders of public opinion, and it may be accepted without question that most Christian religious organizations have convicted the medicine man of every imaginable fault, from simple charlatanism to infernal necromancy. A recent writer on the general subject of knowledge observes, when it is necessary to find an explanation for some difficult problem in natural phenomena, it's usually wisest to accept the simplest solution that will reasonably cover the elements of the matter. Now, it seems to me, if this method of reasoning is applied to the known accomplishments of the Indian medicine man, the simplest solution would be to admit that he possesses psychic or mediumistic powers. Civilized man has departed from the ways of nature into artificial habits, and I would say habitats, of his own invention. He has surrounded himself with a material, economic, and industrial system which is no part of natural law. See, but is it really man, like mankind, that did all that? Sure, they were manipulated into doing it, and they thought that they were doing it. But what if there was actually an intervention, and maybe that there's something operating from behind the scenes that's keeping people in this kind of material, economic, and industrial system that has no part in natural law? And why would they do that? Right? To cut off people's connection. Yeah. So anyways, I could go on and on about that, but yeah. So what I'm trying to get at here is that like man is mankind. When I say man, that's what I mean, mankind. Mankind gets blamed for everything, right? For all the ills of the world and so on, when maybe there's something, just consider it. Maybe there's something operating behind the curtains, like the Wizard of Oz, that are actually the ones that are really, truly responsible. And it's an incredible sleight of hand, and by black magic and sleight of hand and all kinds of stuff. using occult knowledge against the general masses that a small percentage of other people have, or, well, beings, okay? That this kind of infiltration and then incursion and destruction is accomplished. All right, anyways. Civilized man has departed. Yes, I said that. Okay. It's an ersatz structure, ever threatening to collapse upon its inventors. The modern intellectual giant, hypnotized by the superstition that he is not superstitious, is burdened by groundless notions that any intelligent savage would laugh to scorn. Nature, wise in all her ways, bestows upon her creations the knowledge necessary for their survival. Man, in the process of becoming civilized, has dammed up his instincts and impulses and thus has lost his psychic bond with universal life. Yes, the first principle. He will blunder along, falling from one conceit into another. So he's lost in the labyrinth. It is in... Yes, I'm interjecting a little bit there. Excuse me. It's in this way that nature, in the end, outwits the human error. For man, after long suffering, will come to realize that only by listening to the voice of nature can he survive. This discovery is wisdom. Guidance through prayer. When the medicine man goes out into the night, builds his vigil fire on the top of some lonely hill, sets his prayer sticks in a circle around him, and smokes his medicine pipe to the 6 directions, he is one humble human being seeking to know the way of the great mother of all that lives. He brings no boasted learning of his own, nor does he come to criticize and condemn. He is alone with the stars. Raising his outspread arms to the skies and the mountains, he breathes the simple prayer of a lonely creation, wandering it knows not where, struggling it knows not why. Great Spirit, show us the way. How does a man dare to say that there is no answer to this prayer? Will the old mother who guides the birds and animals and teaches them to care for their young and to build simple nests and dens for their kind, will she remain silent to the need of the noblest of her creatures? Will the world move on majestically amidst the harmony of the spheres, and the old man reverently waiting by his vigil fire listen in vain for the voice of his God? Has the skeptic ever waited and fasted for 7 days in the wilderness while the low breeze tosses the feathers on his prayer sticks? Has the contemporary white man ever sought his way of life in humble waiting, pouring forth all the love and devotion of his heart into the air, cold with the gray of the dawn? If he is not, then he has no right to say that the Indian's prayer is unanswered, for he does not know. It's in these long hours of silent communion that the medicine man hears the voices of the spirits, feels the powers of the air moving through his body, sees the visions that guide his way, and gains the strength to lead his people according to the will of the old ones who sit in the rainbow lodge of the sky and send their voices down the spirit road of the Milky Way. Here the priest learns the secrets of the soul and its powers and develops the mystic sight that enables him to see the spirits that float in the ethers like the flying seeds of the thistle. That's actually really a good analogy. I remember at one point in my life, I used to work in this pawn shop, and the owner at that time was really a terrific woman. But yeah, and she was having a big sale on a weekend, and she asked me to step over into the second kind of area and just sort of try to keep an eye on the more expensive items, just hang out there and keep an eye out. And so I'm standing there, and I don't know, some movement, some feeling, I don't know, drew my attention to the ceiling. And up there, like all these little thistle downs, there was all these discarnate humans. and they looked like little thistledown seeds darting around in the air. And there was, I tried counting like 25, 30. They were popping in and out of this dimension and into others, but they were zipping around and flying around and floating around like he says here, like the flying seeds of the thistle. And it was really very interesting. And I watched them for like 15 minutes at least. I had to keep looking down at the floor, keeping an eye on the merchandise. And I kept looking up and watching them floating around up there and just having a grand time. And there was a whole bunch of them. It was a lot. So, when I say things like, I know how like big they are or whatever, like I'm not saying it based on something I read or saw on the internet. I'm basing stuff on my own personal experiences. Anyway, I just had to comment that that's a really terrific way to describe it. Okay, in his raptures, the old man feels himself slowly leaving his body to climb with floating feet the pathway of stars that leads to the great medicine lodge, where the Manitos sit in council, each smoking his long pipe. We cannot do these things that the old priests do, because we have not the faith of the simple Indian mystic. But have we any right to deny his powers merely because we live another way, one that has taken us far from the little path that leads to the Vigil Hill? One that has taken us far from the straight path. That was me interjecting. Okay. We have our religion, but it is not strong in our hearts. And our priests, well, it was forced down people's throats. That's something that just keeps getting glossed over by the Catholic Church, the Vatican. But the reality is that was forced down people's throats. And I mean literally forced. They would put villages to the torch. They put people in gibbets. They tortured them. If you've ever seen any of the images of, these medieval devices that they were using on witches and anyone else that they considered to be a heretic or who was not bending the knee to what they considered to be the way. You can't imagine. It is so horrible. Like torturous things. Just horrible things. Anyways. No kidding, it's not strong in our hearts. And our priests have not stayed close to the way of the old gods. Our ways are those of the jarring sect, the clash of creeds, the many roads that twist about in endless confusion. But the Indian medicine man has kept to that other little path that leads to the high place. He's climbed it many times. And at the top of his hill of prayer are the voices and the visions, the spirit guidance of his people. Exactly. It's like a moving meditation. This is, people are like, well, how do you do a spiritual practice? Well, you don't set time aside to do it. The fact of the matter is that you have to live it. It's every moment of every day. You're living it. It's a living art. Okay, let's go on. I don't want to get too far off course. We're heading up to the top of the hour here. My goodness, time is flying. Hippocrates, the father of medicine. From the viewpoint of the metaphysician, had it not been for the mysteries of Asclepius, there could have been no Hippocrates. He took his vows before the altar of Asclepius and became a priest-physician. His clinical methods established a precedent which changed the whole course of medical thought, but the materialist physician should remember that the father of medicine was to the end of his days a priest, and the wise and careful observations that have brought him the eternal gratitude of mankind were begun in the house of the healing gods. And there's a picture here, and it says Hippocrates, born 460 BC, called the father of medicine. Oh, and here we go. We are finished chapter 2, and we're almost at the top of the hour, so we're going to stop here. And then we're going to move on to chapter 3, and we're getting pretty far here. We're almost to the midpoint of this book. So, yeah. I hope that you guys have been enjoying it and following along, and hope that you learned some stuff, and there's a lot of really good information in here, and, food for thought, things to meditate on and think about. Anyways, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. And we'll see you back here again really soon, I hope. And follow along with me. And we will learn this stuff together, okay? We'll cover it together. Have a great day wherever you are. And take care until the next time I see you. Bye for now.